far away. In the depth of the last ice age, the world carries a colder breath than it does today. Vast sheets of glacial ice press down upon northern lands. Mountains vanish beneath white walls of frozen weight. Yet even here, beneath the heavy grip of ice, rivers continue to flow. They are ancient arteries, cutting paths through rock and soil, feeding valleys, carving channels toward the sea. The river is not visible from far above, where the glacier stretches endlessly, but beneath the frozen crust, meltwater gathers and moves. It flows in hidden tunnels of blue ice, pressing forward with relentless force. As it escapes, it emerges into the open air, joining other streams, and forms wide channels that ripple across the tundra. These rivers are not gentle. They flood, they break bank, they reshape the earth again and again. Still, they offer life. Animals follow the water. Mammoth herds march across frozen plains, lowering their trunks into icy pools. Woolly rhinoceroses graze at the margins of streams, scraping frost-covered grasses. Reindeer move in great numbers, guided by instinct and by scent. Where there is water, plants take root in summer. Where plants thrive, animals gather. And where animals gather, humans will soon arrive. The river marks a boundary, but it also marks a path. It is at once obstacle and invitation. For early humans, the rivers of the Ice Age provide direction through an unfamiliar world. They are easier to follow than the endless horizon of snow. They give access to fish, to reeds for fire, to animals that come to drink. And so the river becomes more than water. It becomes a guide. Archaeologists have traced these Ice Age rivers in landscapes long since changed. Many are buried under later soil, their courses forgotten. Some appear only as faint depressions, dry channels across modern plains. Yet ancient stone tools scatter their banks. A flake of obsidian, a hammerstone of quartzite, a hearth circle of burned bones, all rest where people once paused beside the flowing water. These traces tell us that humans and rivers are inseparable in their earliest wanderings. One discovery in northern Europe reveals such a story. Near an ancient river terrace, stone blades lie beneath layers of silt. They date back tens of thousands of years, to a time when ice sheets advanced and retreated with the shifting climate. The tools suggest small groups stopping briefly, perhaps to hunt or to cross. The riverbank, quiet now, once echoed with the steps of both humans and animals sharing the same narrow passage. But not all questions find answers. Scientists still debate how continuous these river networks truly were. Some believe that long glacial rivers formed uninterrupted corridors, stretching across hundreds of kilometers. Others argue they broke into fragments, blocked by ice or drought. If they were corridors, they could have guided migration on a continental scale. If fragmented, then human groups would have faced greater obstacles, forced to detour into harsher terrain. The truth may shift between the two. Step by step, the river teaches adaptation. Ice Age climates change constantly. A warming phase releases torrents of meltwater, flooding valleys, sweeping debris downstream. A cooling phase locks water once more, freezing channels, silencing currents. Humans who live along these rivers must adjust to each rhythm. They learn to build temporary shelters on high ground to avoid floods. They time their hunts to the movement of migrating herds. They move upstream when fish vanish from the lower reaches. Survival depends on listening to the river's pulse. From a planetary view, these rivers are small, but their influence is vast. While glaciers trap enormous volumes of water, sea levels drop. The coastlines stretch outward, exposing broad continental shelves. Rivers extend further, their mouths reaching far beyond where they meet the sea today. New estuaries open wide, rich with fish and shellfish. For humans, these shifting coastlines create fresh opportunities and fresh uncertainties. What is land today may be ocean tomorrow, and what is sea today may become a plain of grass. At that moment in deep time, the world is quieter than ours, but also harsher. The wind moves across frozen plains without trees to stop it. The sun hangs low, casting pale light over white fields. Yet beside the river, life persists. The water keeps moving, even as ice thickens above. It ties together the lives of mammoths, reindeer, predators, and small human groups who learn to read the shifting landscape. The river is more than a setting. It is an unseen architect of movement, or without it, the way forward would be uncertain, a maze of frozen emptiness. With it, there is direction. Archaeological layers show how people returned again and again to the same terraces, the same fords, the same crossings. Even when the river changed its course, memory may have drawn them back to its old bed. A subtle mystery lingers. Did humans understand the river as permanent or as fleeting? Did they see its flow as a fixed path across the land, or did they sense that it might vanish with the ice? We cannot know. What remains is stone and bone, silent against the soil. Yet those traces are enough to say, here, by the river, they paused. Here, they adapted. Here, the story of migration was shaped. The Ice Age river continues unseen beneath the glacier, unseen but vital. Its journey is long, stretching from meltwater pools high in the ice, across plains, toward distant seas. Along its edges, humans begin their own journey, a journey that will carry them beyond valleys and across continents. The river flows on, and so do they. Far to the south, long before rivers froze beneath glaciers, another river begins the journey. It rises in the highlands of East Africa, where rains fall in seasonal rhythm, feeding lakes and marshes. This river belongs to a land that has sheltered humanity since its earliest breath. Here, Homo sapiens evolves, shaped by drought and abundance, by shifting climates, by landscapes both harsh and generous. The African savannas, forests, and coasts are the original cradle. Yet from this cradle, some groups will move outward. The first exodus does not begin with intention of conquest. It begins with small steps, following game, seeking water, moving with the seasons. Rivers play a central role, for they connect the heartlands with distant horizons. The Nile flows north, cutting a green corridor through deserts, leading toward the Mediterranean. The Awash and Omo valleys stretch through Ethiopia, linking upland plateaus to lowland basins. These waterways are not just paths of water, but paths of possibility. Archaeological traces reveal early stages of this outward push. At sites near the Red Sea, stone tools appear that match the styles of East African traditions. They date back roughly 70,000 to 100,000 years. Their presence suggests that humans ventured into the fringes of Arabia even earlier than once believed. Some may have returned, some may have perished, but some kept moving forward. The rivers and coasts they followed left few permanent markers, yet the scattered stones remain. One remarkable find is a collection of obsidian tools carried over long distances. The source of the rock lies more than 100 kilometers from the discovery site. This tells us that humans transported or exchanged materials far beyond their immediate range. A blade of black glass, sharp and fragile, becomes evidence of networks stretching across early landscapes. The rivers may have been boundaries, but they also allowed such exchanges, connecting distant groups through common meeting places. As groups moved outward, they carried not only tools but also genetic heritage. Modern studies of ancient DNA confirm that nearly all non-African populations descend from a small group that left Africa during this period. The genetic bottleneck is narrow, suggesting perhaps only a few thousand individuals crossed into new lands. From them descend the vast diversity of Eurasia, Oceania, and the Americas. A quiet journey of families along rivers and coasts became the foundation of future continents. Yet mysteries remain. Did humans leave in one great wave, or in multiple smaller ones? Some scholars propose that several migrations occurred, some of which failed, their lineages lost. Others suggest a single, successful departure, perhaps triggered by a climatic shift that opened new corridors. Evidence is scattered, and certainty is elusive. What is clear is that water guided the steps. When deserts dried, rivers shrank, and movement halted. When rains returned, corridors reopened, and humans followed them outward once more. The landscape of Africa itself shifted constantly during these times. The Sahara, now arid, was often green. Monsoon rains filled lakes and spread savannas across what is now sand. Rivers carved channels across wide basins, linking seasonal wetlands. For thousands of years, this green Sahara served as both home and highway. Early humans fished in its rivers, hunted gazelle on its grasslands, and moved northward toward the Mediterranean world. When the rains retreated, the Sahara returned to desert, closing the passage. These cycles repeated, pushing and pulling human populations with each shift. To imagine the journey outward is to see a landscape alive with change. Small groups walk along muddy riverbanks, where reeds whisper in the wind. Children gather shellfish at shallow lagoons. Hunters track animals that come to drink at dawn. Fires burn on terraces above floodplains, smoke rising into the cool night. All of this happens without a map, without certainty. The river and the stars are the guides. The path is uncertain, but the rhythm of water draws them forward. From a planetary view, the scale is immense. To leave Africa is to step onto a continental stage that stretches from Arabia to Central Asia, from India to Siberia, from Beringia to the Americas. Yet it begins with only a few rivers and valleys. The Nile, the Rift Valley, streams, the coastal estuaries. Each is a thread in the web that links one continent to the next. What seems small in the moment becomes monumental across millennia. At that time, the seas are lower than today, as ice locks away vast stores of water. The Red Sea narrows, the Bab el-Mandeb Strait shortens, and coastlines extend outward. Mudflats and deltas provide new land for travel and food. What is now ocean was once a plain, rich with shellfish and mangroves. These shifting borders make crossings possible. Without them, the step from Africa to Arabia would be far more difficult. The crossing itself remains uncertain. Some believe it happened at the southern tip of the Red Sea, where the gap between continents is smallest. Others suggest northern routes, through the Sinai and into the Levant. Both may have been used at different times. What matters is not which single path was taken, but that rivers and seas provided the corridors. Water shaped the possibilities, just as ice shaped the limits. This departure from Africa does not erase the homeland. For tens of thousands of years afterward, most humans still live within Africa. The exodus is not a sudden flight, but a gradual branching. Populations expand, contract, shift, and sometimes vanish. Yet slowly, the outward line grows. Each step along a riverbank, each crossing of a shallow strait, adds to a journey that will eventually reach the edges of the earth. When we look back, we see this as the beginning of global migration, but at the time, it is simply survival. The river provides fish, the estuary provides shellfish, the herd provides meat. A family follows these resources, unaware of the destiny their descendants will fulfill. What remains today are scattered blades, fragments of ochre, and DNA within us. Together, they tell the story of leaving the cradle. And so the river flows northward out of Africa, carrying with it the first steps of a species that will one day circle the planet. The water moves slowly, patiently, carving channels through stone and sand along its banks. Humans move too, small, fragile, persistent. They are leaving the cradle, but the memory of its rivers will remain within them, guiding their steps across the unknown, far across the northern continent, where today there is only sand and silence, lies a very different landscape in the deep past. During cycles of the Ice Age, the Sahara does not always stretch as desert. Instead, it shifts with the rhythm of Earth's orbit, tilting the balance of climate. Every 20,000 years or so, monsoon rains sweep farther north, grasslands replace dunes, lakes spread wide across basins, rivers carve their way through valleys, linking pools of water to distant seas. This is the Green Sahara. The Green Sahara is not a single event but a repeating pattern. Archaeological surveys show layers of former lake shores with shells, fish bones, and stone tools embedded in mud now buried beneath sand. Fossil river channels, visible from satellites, cross thousands of kilometers. They tell of times when water once flowed freely where dunes now rise. These were not narrow trickles, but wide channels, braided streams that sustained whole ecosystems. In such times, the Sahara becomes not a barrier, but a bridge. Human groups move into these green corridors with caution, but also opportunity. Herds of gazelle and antelope graze near lakes. Hippopotamus wallow in shallow channels. Crocodiles glide in slow rivers. Where animals gather, humans follow. Stone tools scatter across ancient lake beds, from simple flakes to carefully shaped blades. Hearths appear, circles of burned stone marking campfires. The Green Sahara becomes a temporary home, rich with food and water. One lesser-known detail comes from shell beads discovered far inland. These shells originated on distant coasts, carried hundreds of kilometers into the Sahara. They were likely strung as ornaments, symbols of connection or exchange. Their presence shows that humans did not live in isolation. Even in vast grasslands, networks linked groups across hundreds of kilometers. Rivers and lakes served as the nodes of these networks, places where groups met, traded, and shared. Yet the Green Sahara holds mysteries. Did humans cross it fully, using it as a highway to the Mediterranean and beyond? Or did they remain near its lakes, waiting until climates shifted again? Some evidence suggests that groups successfully crossed into North Africa and Europe during wet phases. Other findings show repeated abandonment when deserts returned. The debate continues, because each wet phase left only fragments of its record. The shifting sands have buried much of the story. planetary-scale forces drive these rhythms. As Earth wobbles on its axis and shifts its orbit, the distribution of sunlight changes, monsoons intensify, pulling rains farther north, greening the Sahara. When the orbital cycle shifts again, rains retreat south and deserts return. These swings are vast in scale, yet they govern the daily survival of small human groups. To them, the return of grasses means abundance, while the return of sand means departure. Life in the Green Sahara is never permanent. Lakes grow shallow, fish vanish, reeds dry, and herds move on. Humans respond in kind. They follow rivers to new water, abandon old camps, and seek new ground. Their stone tools remain scattered across dried basins, waiting to be uncovered thousands of years later. These objects are the only voices that speak of how people adapted to cycles far beyond their control. At that moment in prehistory, the Sahara is not empty. It echoes with birdsong near rivers, with the calls of antelope, with the crack of wood in campfires. Families gather reeds. Hunters track animals. Children play at the water's edge. The sound of frogs and insects fills the night air, in contrast to the silence of desert sands today. This living landscape offers both promise and uncertainty. For the people who depend on it know it may vanish within generations. One striking find comes from Nabta Playa, a once lush basin in southern Egypt. Archaeologists uncovered stone circles and ceremonial structures built by humans who lived beside seasonal lakes. These constructions date to later wet phases, thousands of years after the first migrations. They suggest that rivers and lakes were not only practical resources but also spiritual centers. People gathered around water not only to survive, but to create meaning and connection. Mystery deepens when considering how far the Green Sahara extended its influence. Did its rivers guide humans all the way to the Mediterranean coast, easing their way into Europe, or did it only provide temporary respite, with larger migrations waiting for other corridors? Genetic and archaeological records leave the question unresolved. What is certain is that each green phase opened doors, and humans stepped through them, even if those doors later closed. From above, the Sahara during a green phase would appear like a mosaic of lakes and rivers stretching across thousands of kilometers. Herds move in wide arcs across savannas. Groups of humans walk along riverbanks, carrying tools, food, and fire. Their paths extend farther than the eye can see. Journeys longer than from Paris to Seoul. Yet to them, each day is measured by the distance to water, the search for game, the safety of camp. The Green Sahara eventually fades. Monsoon rains withdraw. Lakes shrink into salt flats. Rivers dry into sand-filled channels. Grasslands wither, leaving behind bones and empty hearths. Human groups move on, some back toward the Nile, some toward the Levant, some deeper into Africa. The once green corridors become deserts again, concealing the evidence of their passing. Yet the memory of water persists in oral traditions, in carved stones, and in the faint traces uncovered by modern science. The Sahara, whether green or arid, is never static. It breathes with the planet's cycles. In its green state, it nurtures life and movement. In its arid state, it challenges survival and halts migration. For humanity, it is both path and wall, bridge and barrier. Those who live within it adapt to its rhythms, leaving only scattered signs of their journeys. And so, across the Green Sahara, rivers flow once more in deep time, They carry fish and crocodiles. They gather herds and hunters. They create passageways for humans moving north. Though the desert returns, though dunes bury the channels, the memory remains. The Green Sahara is both lost world and hidden highway, shaping the earliest migrations beyond the cradle. At the edge of Africa, the land narrows. The continent leans toward Arabia, separated only by a strip of water known today as the Red Sea. During the Ice Age, this crossing is shorter, the sea levels lower. What is now a wide channel of salt water becomes, in places, a narrow strait. The Bab el-Mandeb Gap contracts to only a few kilometers, where coastlines stretch outward and mudflats appear. For early humans, this is not merely a boundary, it is a threshold. The Red Sea coasts offer food and shelter. Archaeological surveys reveal shell middens, heaps of discarded shells, stretching along ancient shorelines. These are the remains of meals taken by early humans who gathered shellfish, crabs, and other coastal resources. Fire-blackened stones lie nearby, silent signs of cooking sites. Such places remind us that survival does not always come from hunting great animals. Sometimes it comes from bending to the rhythms of the tide, waiting for the sea to withdraw, and gathering what it leaves behind. Lesser-known discoveries show that obsidian tools made on one coast sometimes appear on the other. This suggests that people not only crossed the strait but also carried objects back and forth. Obsidian is sharp but fragile, and its presence hints at exchange networks across water. To move these tools required intention, effort, and likely repeated crossings. What now seems like a formidable boundary was, for them, a bridge. Yet uncertainty surrounds this migration. Some researchers argue that crossings were deliberate, using simple rafts or dugout logs. Others believe they may have been accidental, driven by storms or currents. Without preserved boats, the question remains open. Still, genetic studies confirm that descendants of these early travelers moved deep into Arabia and beyond. Whether by plan or chance, they succeeded in leaving Africa. At this time, rivers are never far from the story. Streams flow down from the Ethiopian highlands into the Red Sea, carving fertile deltas. Seasonal floods scatter rich soil across floodplains, attracting birds and animals. Humans camp near these freshwater mouths, balancing between river and sea. From such points, they can fish inland, gather reeds, and also harvest from tidal pools. These dual landscapes, fresh and salt, river and sea, provide the resources that make crossings possible. From a planetary perspective, the crossing is small, only a few kilometers of water. Yet its meaning is immense. To step from Africa into Arabia is to enter a new continent, a new world of deserts, oases, and mountain ranges. Beyond lie corridors that lead eastward into India, Central Asia, and ultimately to all the rest of the earth. The Red Sea is not just water. It is the first gateway. At that moment in time, the coasts are alive with life. Mangroves line sheltered bays. Flocks of seabirds settle on tidal flats. Fish schools swirl in shallow lagoons. Along the beaches, human footprints press into wet sand, preserved briefly before waves erase them. Sometimes, those prints remain fossilized, captured in hardened layers, surviving for tens of thousands of years. They are fragile testimonies of journeys otherwise invisible. A subtle mystery lingers about timing. Some argue that humans crossed as early as 120,000 years ago, during an earlier wet phase when climates were favorable. Others maintain that the successful crossing occurred closer to 70,000 years ago. coinciding with later genetic signals. The truth may be both. Repeated attempts, some lost, some enduring. Each attempt would have been shaped by rivers feeding into the coasts, by fish runs, by the presence or absence of rain. For those who made the journey, the world did not suddenly expand in their awareness. They followed the same patterns as before: walk along a river, camp near its banks, move when food runs out. Yet slowly, step by step, their path carried them farther from their origin. As they looked back across the strait, Africa remained visible, a line of land across the water. Ahead lay Arabia, dry and rugged, but dotted with streams fed by monsoon rains. Evidence from cave sites in Arabia supports this view. Stone tools similar to East African styles appear in limestone shelters, often near ancient riverbeds. These sites show that humans moved inland, not just along the coast. They followed wadis, dry valleys that carried water during rains. Some wadis still hold faint traces of ancient lakes, where hearths and tools remain buried in silt. These finds tie the crossing of the Red Sea to the pursuit of rivers in a new land. The rivers of Arabia are seasonal. Unlike the Nile or the great African lakes, they flow only when rains arrive, then vanish again into dryness. To live here, humans had to adjust to rhythms of scarcity. They stored food, shifted camps, and likely returned to coastal resources when inland waters failed. This adaptation marks one of the earliest lessons of migration, the ability to weave survival across different ecosystems, never relying on one alone. The planetary forces remain constant. Ice sheets lock away ocean water, lowering seas. Coastlines extend outward, exposing wide shelves. These new lands offer temporary pathways, later drowned when ice melts. The Red Sea crossing is thus a fleeting opportunity, possible only because of glacial cycles. If sea levels had been higher, the gap would have been too wide. The fact that humans moved when they did is tied directly to the frozen balance of the planet. The image is quiet but immense. A small group gathers near the strait. Fires burn low. The stars above reflect in the water. In the morning, they step into simple rafts, or perhaps cling to logs, or perhaps follow sandbars revealed by the tides. On the far side, they walk again along river valleys, finding new plants, new animals, new horizons. The Red Sea is behind them, yet the rivers ahead continue to guide their steps. In the end, this crossing is not an isolated event, but part of the long dialogue between water and humanity. Rivers lead to seas, seas to new rivers, and each crossing extends the journey farther. From the Red Sea onward, the world is open, though filled with challenge. The river flows into the ocean, and humanity flows with it, into the unknown. Beyond the narrow straits of the Red Sea and the dry wadis of Arabia, the path of migration bends eastward into the Indian subcontinent. Here, a new rhythm governs the land. It is the rhythm of the monsoon. Each year, winds shift, bringing vast clouds of moisture from the ocean. Rain pours across valleys and plains, filling rivers until they overflow. Then, with equal force, the rains retreat, leaving rivers to shrink, soils to dry, and forests to quiet. For early humans moving into this region, survival depends on reading the pulse of these seasonal cycles. During the wet months, rivers swell into torrents. Valleys become green corridors, full of fish, fruiting trees and herds of grazing animals. Families camp on high ground above the floods, close enough to draw water and food. yet safe from sudden surges. They collect reeds for fire, stones for tools, and wood for shelters. They know that the abundance will not last. When the rains pass, rivers shrink to narrow flows, leaving behind pools where fish are trapped. People gather them with spears or baskets, using every resource before moving on. Archaeological traces confirm this rhythm of life. In the Narmada Basin, layers of stone tools reveal long sequences of human presence, stretching back before Homo sapiens. By 70,000 years ago, modern humans add their mark to this landscape. Microliths, tiny, sharp blades carefully shaped from flint or chert, appear near rivers and lakes. These small tools are evidence of adaptation, suited for hunting, scraping, and cutting in diverse environments. They show a people capable of flexibility, able to craft what they need as climates shift. One quieter detail lies in caves of southern India. Fragments of red ochre appear there, carried by humans who valued more than food and shelter. The ochre may have been ground for body marking, for painting objects, or for symbolic practices that leave no direct trace. To carry pigment across river valleys shows that culture and meaning flowed with migration, inseparable from survival. These fragments whisper of lives in which rivers were not only places to drink and fish, but also places where identity and expression took form. Still, the story holds uncertainties. Scholars debate whether humans moved mostly along the coasts, harvesting shellfish and mangrove resources, or whether they pushed inland along monsoon-fed rivers. Both routes offered opportunities. Both demanded adaptation. When monsoons were strong, rivers invited travel deep into the continent. When rains weakened, coasts may have been safer. Migration was never one straight line, but a shifting web, shaped by climate's breath. The monsoon itself is a planetary force. Driven by the tilt of Earth and the contrast of land and sea, its reach covers half a continent. For small human groups, its rhythm was both predictable and unstable. Each year, rains came, but over centuries, their strength waxed and waned. There were centuries of plenty, when rivers filled and lakes spread wide, followed by centuries of drought, when streams dried and lands cracked. To live here was to trust the river, yet never rely on it completely. Step by step, families followed these waters. They gathered tubers from muddy banks, hunted deer and antelope that grazed on monsoon grass, and fished in swollen streams. Children played in shallow pools left behind after floods, while adults sharpened stone blades on smooth river pebbles. Every action carried them farther from Africa, yet each day was measured only by food, water, and shelter. Evidence of megafauna deepens the picture. Fossil bones of elephants, rhinoceroses, and giant cattle mark river valleys. These animals were part of the landscape, shaping choices of movement and hunting. Confronting such creatures demanded skill and cooperation. More often, humans may have scavenged from carcasses, cutting meat with sharp microliths before predators returned. Rivers gathered them all, hunter and prey, in shared corridors of survival. A dramatic chapter emerges at Jwalapuram in southern India. Beneath layers of volcanic ash from the Toba eruption, stone tools remain. The eruption, among the largest in Earth's history, spread ash across skies, cooling climates and disrupting ecosystems. Yet the tools below and above the ash show that humans endured. They found refuge in river valleys, where water, fish, and plants sustained them while the wider world faltered. Here the river was not only a guide, but also a shield against catastrophe. Mysteries remain about encounters with earlier hominins. Fossil hints suggest that archaic populations lived in parts of India before Homo sapiens arrived. Did they meet? Did they exchange skills or genes? The record is thin. Only stone artifacts tell us of their presence, leaving questions without answers. Still, the rivers may have brought them together, as they later brought Neanderthals and Denisovans into contact with sapiens. From a broader scale, the rivers of India do more than provide food. They anchor memory. Even today, the Ganges and Indus hold deep cultural meaning. Their role as lifelines stretches back into prehistory, when the first humans traced their banks. To picture those times is to see small groups under monsoon skies, resting by fires, listening to night insects, watching stars reflected in dark pools. They do not know they are shaping the destiny of continents. They know only that water gives life, and that following it brings hope. The monsoon is harsh as well as generous. Floods sweep away camps. Droughts parch the land. Storms break trees. For early humans, resilience lies in movement. They do not build permanent homes. They walk when rivers rise, and they walk when rivers dry. Over generations, this rhythm carries them east, toward the forests of Southeast Asia, toward islands and seas yet to be crossed. In this journey, rivers remain companions. They are lines of continuity across a shifting world. They flow when rains arrive, they shrink when rains withdraw, and they mark the turning of time itself. Along their banks, people carve tools, paint with ochre, gather food, and dream. The monsoon commands the land, but rivers interpret its command in ways humans can live with. Following them, humanity moves onward, step by step, into the wider world. As humans follow the monsoon rivers eastward, their path bends once more into new terrain. Beyond the plains of India, valleys rise toward Central Asia, and river systems stretch north and west into colder climates. Here, the journey of Homo sapiens intersects with others, for they are not alone. Across these lands dwell populations of Neanderthals and Denisovans, branches of the same wider family, shaped by different landscapes, yet sharing much of the same world. The rivers become the meeting ground. Archaeological traces mark these encounters. In Europe and Western Asia, layers of stone tools shift from Neanderthal to modern human styles, sometimes overlapping. Scrapers, blades, and points show subtle differences but also surprising similarities. Fireplaces built in caves, bones cut with stone, pigments ground into powder, all appear in the record of both species. It is at river valleys and cave mouths that these traces cluster, places where water gathered life, and where humans of different kinds might have crossed paths. Genetic evidence confirms that these meetings were not only encounters of proximity but also of exchange. Modern people outside Africa carry fragments of Neanderthal DNA, reminders of intimate contact. In parts of Asia, Denisovan ancestry lingers as well, especially in populations of Oceania. These genetic legacies speak of moments by riverbanks when groups met, lived side by side, and sometimes joined together. The rivers that guided their travels also guided these unions, shaping the lineage of humanity. Yet much remains uncertain. Did these meetings bring cooperation, or conflict, or both? Did groups trade tools, share fire, or teach new techniques? Or did they compete for the same hunting grounds, avoiding one another when possible? The archaeological record is fragmentary, and it does not tell us stories of emotion or choice. It offers only scattered tools, mixed bones, and the faint signatures of genes passed forward. The silence leaves space for mystery. One lesser-known detail comes from Denisova Cave in the Altai Mountains of Siberia. Here, in layers of soil within a limestone chamber, researchers found the fragment of a finger bone and a few teeth. From these fragments came the entire revelation of Denisovans, a population once unknown. DNA from the finger bone showed it belonged to a young girl, neither Neanderthal nor Homo sapiens, but a close relative. Later discoveries revealed that a child of mixed Neanderthal and Denisovan ancestry also lived here. This cave, overlooking a river valley, preserves evidence of ancient contact across human lineages. From a planetary scale, these encounters unfold during a time of shifting climates. Ice sheets expand and contract, lowering seas, cooling summers, reshaping habitats. As glaciers advance, rivers carry torrents of meltwater across Eurasia. As they retreat, grasslands spread, opening routes for migration. These swings force populations into new territories, pressing Neanderthals south, drawing Homo sapiens north, and creating zones of overlap. Rivers act as boundaries at times, but just as often they serve as bridges between groups. The image of such a meeting is quiet and ordinary. On the bank of a river, herds of animals gather. Two groups of humans, different in features but alike in needs, may have approached from opposite sides. Both light fires, both shape tools, both watch the movement of mammoths and reindeer. The river runs between them, reflecting stars in its current. Did they speak, gesture, share food, or did they remain apart, watching one another across the water? The record cannot say. What remains are echoes etched in stone and gene alike. Neanderthals were skilled hunters, adapted to colder climates. Their tools were strong and efficient, their bodies built for endurance. Denisovans, though known only from a few bones, left their mark in genes that help modern Tibetans adapt to high altitude. These were not simple or primitive beings. They carried knowledge and resilience shaped by hundreds of thousands of years. When Homo sapiens met them, the exchange was not one-sided. It was part of a broader dialogue written in adaptation itself. One enduring mystery is why Neanderthals and Denisovans eventually disappeared, while Homo sapiens expanded. Climate shifts surely played a role, narrowing their habitats. Population size may have been a factor, with Homo sapiens more numerous or more connected across regions. Perhaps cultural innovations, symbolic communication, broader exchange networks gave sapiens an advantage. Yet none of these answers is complete. The rivers hold part of the truth, for they record where groups moved, met, and vanished. Still, the silence of their absence lingers. Fossils and tools along the Danube, the Dniester, and other rivers in Europe show that Neanderthals once thrived in these corridors. Later layers contain the tools of Homo sapiens. The transition is not abrupt but gradual, as if one current faded while another rose. In Asia, Denisovan traces vanish almost entirely, except for their genetic echoes. Humanity's journey carried forward, absorbing parts of these populations into its own lineage, even as their distinct forms disappeared. The scale of these encounters stretches wider than the imagination of those who lived them. From a modern view, We see migrations across continents, DNA spread across millennia, rivers as highways of connection. But for the groups themselves, each encounter was local, immediate, shaped by hunger, fear, and necessity. A river crossing, a shared cave, a hunt in the same valley. These were the settings of encounters that would ripple across all future generations. Step by step, Homo sapiens moved deeper into Eurasia. The rivers of Central Asia guided them across plains and mountains, through forests and tundra. At each bend, they met new challenges, new species, new relatives. Each encounter added to their story, shaping their genes, their tools, their survival strategies. The river carried them forward, not alone, but in company with others who walked the earth before them. And so, along the banks of Ice Age rivers, humanity meets itself in many forms. Neanderthals, Denisovans, and sapiens share landscapes, fires, and genes. Some encounters fade into silence. Others leave legacies written in blood. The river flows on, indifferent yet constant, a witness to meetings that shaped the course of human destiny. Beyond the forests and valleys of Central Asia, the land opens into an immense plain. Here stretches the Mammoth Steppe, one of the largest ecosystems of the Ice Age. It extends from Western Europe across Siberia and into North America. A grassland biome unlike any today. Cold, dry winds sweep across it. But the ground is not covered in ice. Instead, grasses, sedges, and low shrubs spread for thousands of kilometers. This open land, though harsh, supports countless herds of animals, and soon, human migration as well. The rivers of the Mammoth Steppe cut through this expanse, winding across plains and feeding into larger basins. They are wide and slow in summer, frozen in winter, yet always shaping the routes of movement. Mammoths, bison, horses, and reindeer gather at their banks. Wolves and lions stalk the herds. Alongside them, small groups of Homo sapiens walk, hunt, and camp, finding in the steppe both abundance and danger. The rivers become the threads that weave life through this endless land. Archaeological traces of these journeys remain scattered along river terraces at sites like Kostenki in Russia. Stone tools, ornaments, and even early structures built from mammoth bones have been uncovered. The artifacts lie beside ancient river channels, where humans likely paused to fish, hunt, and gather. These sites show that the Mammoth Steppe was not merely crossed but inhabited, sometimes for generations, before groups moved farther east. One lesser-known discovery is a pendant carved from mammoth ivory, found near a Siberian river. The piece is small, marked with deliberate incisions that may have counted time or recorded events. Its presence suggests more than survival. It hints at symbolic thought, at memory inscribed into objects. That such a pendant was created beside a river in the cold steppe reminds us that human life here carried imagination as well as necessity. Yet, questions remain. How did humans endure winters that plunged far below freezing? Did they rely primarily on large game hunting, or did rivers provide fish and plants that softened the extremes? Some evidence suggests they stored food, preserving meat in frozen ground. Others argue that rivers offered vital fallback resources, especially during lean times when herds moved on. The balance of hunting, gathering, and fishing is still debated, leaving parts of the story unresolved. From a planetary scale, the Mammoth Steppe was vast, covering nearly a quarter of the northern hemisphere. It flourished because Ice Age climates locked water into glaciers, reducing rainfall but keeping conditions dry and cool. This combination created grasslands where today there are forests or tundra. When the Ice Age ended, warming and wetter climates replaced the steppe with new ecosystems, erasing its unique character. For tens of thousands of years, however, it was a corridor of migration, stretching farther than any river alone. In daily life, the scene was stark but full of movement. Herds thunder across frozen ground. Hunters walk in long lines along riverbanks, carrying spears tipped with stone and bone. Fires burn low against winds, smoke drifting into pale skies. Camps are made with mammoth hides stretched over bone frames, set near water where reeds can be cut and fish caught. Children play at the edges of camps, while adults prepare tools from flint and ivory. Each action is measured against the vastness of the steppe, where horizon meets horizon without end. The mammoth itself defines this world. These giants, with curved tusks and thick fur, roam in herds across rivers and plains. They provide meat, hides, bones, and even fuel, as their fat and dung are burned in fires. Archaeological layers show cut marks on mammoth bones, evidence of butchery and reliance on these animals. Yet they are not the only resource. Fish bones appear in hearths, and bird remains suggest that rivers added to diets. The steppe, though dominated by mammoths, was sustained by many species. Mysteries surround how humans interacted with Neanderthals and Denisovans in this region. Did some of these encounters occur here, on the wide plains where resources were abundant but winters harsh? Genetic evidence suggests that admixture events happened in northern and eastern Eurasia, perhaps along the same rivers that humans followed. If so, the mammoth steppe was not only a corridor of animals, but of human lineages as well. Kostenki and other sites along the Don and Volga rivers also yield evidence of early symbolic life. Beads made from ivory and shells appear here, far from any coast. These ornaments show that humans carried items across long distances, or traded them between groups. A shell bead found hundreds of kilometers inland proves connection beyond immediate survival. Such finds add depth to the picture. Humans on the mammoth steppe were not only enduring, but also weaving threads of meaning across landscapes. From a wider view, the mammoth steppe is both daunting and inviting. It stretches farther than a journey from Paris to Seoul, yet rivers carve it into pathways that humans can follow. Each bend in the water provides a place to rest, to hunt, to gather. Each crossing marks another step into the unknown east. The rivers are guides, silent and steady, carrying life through a land otherwise open and endless. To picture it is to imagine a horizon without trees, a sky heavy with low sun, and a river cutting dark across pale grass. A group of humans walk slowly along the bank, their breath visible in the cold air. They pause to drink, to watch mammoths cross ahead, to mark their presence with footprints in frozen soil. Behind them lies Europe, ahead lies Siberia, and beyond that lies a world yet untouched. The mammoth steppe is not only land, but passage, linking continents through time. And so, along these Ice Age rivers, humanity learns to live in vastness. They adapt to cold, to herds, to distance itself. They build shelters from bones, carve ornaments from ivory, and carry fire against the wind. The river flows through it all, constant amid change, guiding the footsteps of those who will one day reach the farthest edge of the earth. The Ice Age steppe is wide and open, but life gathers at its rivers. Water flows across plains that stretch without end, and along these banks people pause. Here, in the shelter of reeds or terraces, they make their most enduring companion, fire. The two, river and flame, shape human survival. One provides water, food, and pathways. The other offers heat, light, and protection. Together they create places where small groups rest, eat, and adapt to a demanding world. Archaeology preserves the memory of these fires. At sites from Western Europe to the Siberian plain, blackened hearths remain in ancient sediments. Circles of stones, layers of charcoal, and fragments of burned bone tell of long evenings beside flames. Charred mammoth ribs, roasted fish bones, cracked nutshells. These details show that humans used fire to expand their diets. Without cooking, many of these foods would be harder to chew, digest, or preserve. Fire multiplies what rivers provide. One lesser-known discovery comes from Gesher Beno Yaakov in Israel, a site by the Jordan River. Here, evidence of controlled fire use extends back nearly 780,000 years, long before Homo sapiens. By the time Ice Age humans followed rivers across Eurasia, fire was a refined skill. They no longer relied only on lightning or wild flames. They carried embers, rekindled spark, and kept fires alive for weeks. Along each river stop, they left ash stains that still remain. The mystery is not whether humans had fire, but how they mastered it. Did the knowledge spread outward from a single origin, or did different groups learn independently? Some researchers see early hearths in Africa as the cradle of flame. Others argue that people across regions discovered fire anew, adapting it to local environments. No single answer has prevailed. What we know is that by the last glacial maximum, every group carried fire into even the coldest valleys. At night, fire transforms the riverbank. The steppe is dark, winds sharp, predators near. Yet inside the glow, the space becomes safe. Sparks rise into the sky, echoing the stars reflected in the water. Children huddle close to warmth, while adults scrape hides, retouch stone blades, or roast meat. Songs may have been hummed softly, or stories traced in gesture. Fire creates not only safety but community. It gives a focus where people gather, where thought extends into culture. From a planetary view, this skill changes the map of possibility. With fire, humans enter colder latitudes, settle longer in valleys, and endure winters that would otherwise be fatal. Hearths in Siberia show that groups survived where temperatures fell far below freezing. Without fire, rivers would still give fish and water, but the cold would drive people away. With fire, rivers and flames together form corridors stretching across continents. One striking example is Dolny Viestonico in Central Europe. Near a river terrace, archaeologists uncovered not only hearths, but also the world's earliest known ceramics. Humans here shaped small figurines from clay and baked them in fire. Many cracked and shattered, yet fragments remain. Some take the form of animals, others of abstract patterns. Their purpose is uncertain, perhaps ritual, perhaps teaching, perhaps simple play. What matters is that fire was used not only for food and warmth, but also for creation. Another detail lies in the layers of hearths themselves at sites in France, Germany, and Russia. Archaeologists find repeated ash deposits stacked one above another. These layers show that camps were returned to again and again. The river offered continuity, The fire marked presence. Groups may have left for seasons, but when they returned, they lit fires in the same places. The landscape held memory through these recurring circles of flame. Mysteries remain about how fire was shared. Did strangers who met by rivers offer one another sparks as signs of trust? Did embers pass between Homo sapiens and Neanderthals, who also controlled fire? At Shanidar Cave in Iraq and other Neanderthal sites, hearths are common, proving their skill. Whether these traditions crossed species lines is unknown, yet rivers, which bring groups together, may have carried not only tools and shells, but also knowledge of flame. The control of fire also reshaped tools. Heat-treated stone flakes have been found in South Africa and possibly Eurasia, showing that people learned to improve the quality of stone by controlled heating. Bones hardened in fire became sharper points. Ashes mixed with clay strengthened figurines. In each case, fire expanded the toolkit beyond what rivers alone provided. From above, the pattern is easy to imagine. Rivers run like silver threads across plains. Along them, small orange lights burn, scattered across vast distances. Each fire is tiny, fragile, threatened by wind and rain, yet together they mark the spread of a species. Fire does not roar like glaciers or stretch like rivers, but in its smallness lies power. It is the constant that allows humanity to push into new frontiers. Daily life depended on balancing these elements. Rivers gave reeds, driftwood, and animal dung, which could all be used as fuel. In treeless tundra, humans gathered whatever burned. Charcoal samples show a wide range of plants. Birch, pine, oak, and willow all burned in Ice Age hearths. Even small twigs carried from riverbanks were valuable. To keep fire alive meant survival. To lose it meant danger. Many groups likely carried embers wrapped in bark or moss, transported carefully as they walked. The presence of fire changed human senses. Nights were no longer wholly dark. The smell of smoke marked camps as human spaces. The sound of crackling wood broke silence. The taste of roasted meat replaced raw flesh. These shifts, small in each moment, defined the species. At riverbanks where animals gathered, humans added their own signature, the glow of firelight, visible for miles across plains. And so, fire by the rivers becomes more than a tool. It becomes an identity. Wherever humans walk, they leave rivers traced with ash, stones, and char. These remnants tell us of meals shared, tools shaped, and thoughts extended beyond survival. The Ice Age world is harsh, but with flame and water together, people endure. The river flows, the fire burns. One moves without end, the other flickers in circles of stone. Together they guide the journey eastward, across valleys, plains, and forests. The story of humanity at this time is written not only in steps, but also in sparks, not only in rivers that cut the earth, but in fires that mark its surface. Along these banks, the species becomes truly at home in the wider world. Across the Ice Age world, rivers continue to shape human movement. They cut paths through valleys, open corridors across plains, and lead toward limestone hills. In many places, these rivers disappear into caverns, where humans find shelter. Within those caves, another story begins. Not of tools or fire, but of symbols. Marks on stone, pigments on walls, carvings in bone. Here, by river-fed caves, humans leave signs of thought that reach beyond survival. Archaeological discoveries confirm this shift. In the caves of Europe, Chauvet, Lascaux, El Castillo, Images of animals spread across walls. Horses, bison, mammoths, and lions appear in ochre, charcoal, and engraved lines. Many of these caves lie close to rivers, which carried people into the limestone hills. The Dordogne Valley in France, for example, holds dozens of painted caves within a narrow river basin. The water guided footsteps, and the caves invited expression. One lesser-known detail lies in Blombos Cave on the South African coast, long before the famous European sites. Here, pieces of ochre are etched with cross-hatched patterns, dating to more than 70,000 years ago. These marks are abstract, not depictions of animals, yet they reveal the same urge to create symbols. The cave lies near an estuary, where fresh water meets the sea. Again, the link between rivers and symbols appears. Water leads to shelter. Shelter leads to expression. The mystery is deep. Why did humans begin to mark stone and paint walls? Was it ritual, a form of teaching, a way to record memory, or simply a response to beauty? No single answer satisfies. Some archaeologists argue that these images reflect hunting magic, an attempt to influence the herds that drank at nearby rivers. Others see them as social bonds, shared acts that tied groups together. Whatever the reason, the act of creating symbols marks a turning point. It shows that human presence is not only physical, but also imagined. From a planetary scale, these symbols echo a broader change. As climates shift, as rivers expand or dry, humans need more than tools to survive. They need cooperation, shared stories, ways to transmit memory across generations. Symbols become a medium of continuity, as steady as rivers themselves. A painted animal on a cave wall outlasts the hunt. A carved bead strung around the neck outlasts the moment of its making. These are forms of permanence in a transient world. In daily life, the caves are quiet sanctuaries. Families gather at entrances where daylight enters. Fires burn, smoke trailing upward into stone vaults. Deeper inside, where light does not reach, hands press pigment onto walls. Some leave handprints, blown around with ochre, creating negative images of fingers and palms. These are intimate marks, as personal as footprints in mud. Others carve bones with repeating lines, perhaps counting, perhaps decoration. Each mark speaks of thought reaching beyond the immediate. A striking example comes from a cave in Sulawesi, Indonesia. Here, the oldest known hand, stencils and animal paintings outside Europe have been found, dating back more than 40,000 years. The site lies near a river valley that would have carried humans as they spread across Southeast Asia. Once again, symbols emerge where rivers flow, as if water guided not only movement, but imagination. Mystery deepens with portable objects. At sites along rivers in Germany and Russia, figurines carved from mammoth ivory appear. The Lion Man of Hohenstein-Stadel, a figure with human body and lion head, dates to around 40,000 years ago. It was carved beside the lone river, in a valley where caves provided shelter. Such an object reveals more than skill. It shows an ability to blend reality and imagination, to conceive of beings beyond the natural world. This, too, is part of the symbolic revolution. The rivers tie these expressions together. They are highways not only of movement but of memory. Shell beads found far inland show that ornaments travelled across groups. Red ochre sources located hundreds of kilometers away prove that pigments were traded or carried deliberately. Rivers connect these resources, ensuring that symbols spread widely. The symbolic record is therefore also a record of connection, binding distant groups into a larger network of shared ideas. From above, the pattern is striking. Rivers wind across continents, and near their valleys, caves hold symbols across Africa, Europe, and Asia. The same themes recur: animals, hands, patterns, beads. These motifs suggest that symbolic thought was not isolated but part of a shared capacity of the species. Just as rivers converge into seas, these symbols converge into a broader flow of culture. The planetary climate provides both challenge and canvas. During cold phases, caves offer protection from wind and snow. During warmer intervals, rivers expand, carrying groups into new regions where symbols appear anew. The shifting cycles of glacial and interglacial times frame the growth of symbolic life, but they do not silence it. Even in hardship, humans continue to mark stone, as if to declare presence in a vast, indifferent world. The quiet of a painted cave can still be felt today. The walls echo with dripping water. Shadows from firelight dance across images of animals long extinct. The river outside continues to flow, as it did when the first pigment was pressed against stone. Inside, the symbols remain, untouched for tens of thousands of years. They remind us that even in the harshest times, humans sought more than survival. They sought meaning. And so, the rivers lead not only to food and fire, but also to art and memory. They carry people into caves where symbols outlast the lives of their makers. They preserve the earliest voices of imagination, silent but enduring, carved and painted into stone. The journey of humanity is not only marked by movement across land, but also by marks left upon it. Along the rivers of the Ice Age, the story of symbols begins. During the Ice Age, seas are lower, winds sharper, and rivers longer. Across Southeast Asia, great waterways such as the Mekong, the Irrawaddy, and the Salween pour their waters into broad plains that today are drowned beneath the ocean. These plains, known as Sundaland, connect much of the region into a vast landmass, where now there are islands: Sumatra, Java, Borneo. There once were continuous forests, swamps, and rivers. People moving eastward out of India and through the monsoon world find themselves in Sundaland, surrounded by rich estuaries, wide deltas, and corridors of migration that extend toward the open sea. Life in Sundaland is abundant. The exposed continental shelf holds mangroves, fish, shellfish, and fertile soil. Seasonal rains swell the rivers, and humans gather resources in great variety. Archaeological evidence from caves and open-air sites shows hearths, stone flakes, bones of hunted animals. Here, people live for thousands of years, adapting their knowledge of river valleys to this new, watery landscape. But eventually, some look farther. Beyond the horizon lies Sahul, the joined continent of Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. To reach it, people must cross seas no glacier could ever remove. The first crossing into Sahul is one of humanity's boldest steps. Even with low sea levels, deep channels remain between Sunda and Sahul. The shortest route still requires a passage of more than 80 kilometers across open water. This is no accidental drift. It demands watercraft, cooperation, and planning. Groups must gather timber, cut logs, weave fiber ropes, and shape rafts strong enough to carry families and fire. They must carry stone tools, food, and perhaps animals. To leave is to commit to uncertainty. Yet people go. Archaeological traces anchor this story. At Majidbebe in northern Australia, tools, grinding stones, and ochre fragments date to at least 65,000 years ago. These finds show that people reached Sahul earlier than once believed. The tools lie near ancient river channels, where fresh water supported settlement. Ochre fragments suggest painting and symbolic expression continued here, as it did in caves of Africa and Europe. Crossing into Sahul did not erase culture. It carried it forward. One lesser-known detail comes from excavations on New Guinea's highlands. Here, evidence of early plant management appears, where humans tended taro and yam more than 9,000 years ago, long before similar practices emerged elsewhere. These fertile valleys are fed by rivers that rise in the mountains, creating a patchwork of gardens and water channels. The continuity between migration and cultivation is clear. The same rivers that guided settlement later nurtured farming. Yet the mystery of how people crossed remains. Some scholars argue for a northern route through Sulawesi and New Guinea, supported by island chains and currents. Others favour a southern path through Timor and into northern Australia. Both may have been used. Genetic evidence suggests more than one founding population entered Sahul, hinting at repeated voyages. Whatever the path, the rivers of Sunderland carried people to the coasts, where voyages began. From a planetary perspective, the crossing to Sahul is unique. Africa, Europe, and Asia could be connected by land during glacial lows, but Sahul was separated by seas that never closed. To reach it meant mastering water. It meant reading stars, tides, and winds. It meant leaving one world for another. Once arrived, people found themselves among creatures unknown elsewhere: marsupial lions, giant kangaroos, enormous flightless birds, reptiles longer than a man. These landscapes were unlike Africa or Eurasia, yet rivers again provided continuity. They gave water, fish, and paths into the interior. Daily life in early Sahul followed familiar rhythms. Families camped near rivers and billabongs. They fished with spears, collected freshwater mussels, and hunted kangaroos that came to drink. Fires burned at night, warding off cold and insects. Charcoal layers in soil show that humans soon began using fire to manage landscapes, encouraging the growth of edible plants and attracting animals. This fire knowledge, still practiced by indigenous Australians today, has roots deep in prehistory. A striking find comes from Nawarala Gabaranmang, a rock shelter in Arnhem Land. Here, painted ceilings more than 28,000 years old reveal humans decorating stone with ochre in sweeping designs. The shelter stands near a river valley, tying water, fire, and art into a single space. Symbolic culture, carried from Africa, now thrives in Australia. The river once again serves as stage and witness to humanity's imagination. The question of scale lingers. Was the crossing into Sahul achieved in a single wave, or in many? Did hundreds arrive at once, or did small groups trickle over generations? The archaeological and genetic records are not clear. What is clear is success. By 40,000 years ago, people lived across the continent, from the coasts of Tasmania to the deserts of the interior. Rivers and waterholes guided their spread, linking even the driest lands into habitable routes. From above, the crossing is immense but silent. Rafts push into open water, guided by paddles, perhaps by starlight. Children sit close, clinging to bundles of reeds. Fires smoulder in clay containers, embers kept alive for landing. Behind lies Sunderland Ahead lies Sahul, with rivers waiting to be discovered. The journey lasts hours or days, but its consequences last millennia. It is one of the great leaps in the human story. Indigenous oral traditions preserve echoes of this time, stories of ancestors arriving by sea, of shaping landscapes with fire, of naming rivers and mountains, reach back across generations. Though tens of thousands of years old, these traditions align with archaeology, carrying memory across time. They remind us that migration is not only physical, but cultural, a weaving of land, water, and story. And so, the rivers of Asia flow outward, joining seas and carrying humanity farther than ever before. They lead to coastlines where rafts are built, to horizons where courage is tested, to lands where new rivers await. The crossing to Sahul is not only a passage across water, but a passage into imagination. Guided by rivers, sustained by fire, humans enter a new continent, leaving footprints that still endure. As the long story of migration unfolds, some groups move south toward warm islands, while others turn north into a harsher world. Siberia, stretching across thousands of kilometers, waits at the edge of the known. Here, winters bite harder than almost anywhere on Earth. The land is marked by permafrost, treeless plains, and long stretches of tundra. Yet through this frozen silence, rivers flow. The Ob, the Yenisei, the Lena, and the Kolyma carve their way across the continent. They are immense, each longer than most countries, each carrying meltwater from mountains and glaciers toward the distant Arctic Ocean. For humans, these rivers become lifelines in a land that seems otherwise endless. In summer, the floodplains of these rivers bloom, grasses rise quickly, flowers scatter color across the tundra, and herds of reindeer and bison graze in great numbers. Mammoths march in slow lines to the water's edge, lowering their tusked heads to drink. Alongside them, humans follow, setting camps near river terraces. Here, the river provides fish, water, and wood carried as drift from upstream forests. Archaeologists uncover hearths blackened with charcoal, stone flakes chipped from river cobbles, and bones split for marrow. These fragments speak of quiet evenings when fires burned against the chill, and families endured in the heart of the frozen north. One lesser-known detail comes from Yana RHS, a site along the Yana River in northeastern Siberia. More than 30,000 years ago, humans lived here, above the Arctic Circle, long before many believed such survival possible. Excavations reveal tools of flint and ivory, ornaments carved from mammoth tusk, and beads made of fox teeth. The presence of jewelry in such a harsh environment tells us something profound. Life here was not only survival. Even at the limits of cold, people carried symbols, decorated their bodies, and gave meaning to their days. The river was not just a corridor of food and water, but also a stage for culture. Mysteries remain about how humans moved through this vast land. Did they surge forward quickly during brief warming periods, or did they linger for generations, slowly learning each valley? Some evidence points to rapid pulses of migration, when interstadial climates softened conditions. Others suggest steady adaptation, with people refining skills to endure long winters. The truth may be mixed, groups pausing at riverside camps for centuries and moving onward when climates shifted or herds thinned. Archaeology alone cannot tell the full pace. The rivers, however, mark continuity. They flow whether humans stay or go, and their banks remember each return. From a planetary perspective, the significance of these rivers is immense. As glaciers expand, sea levels fall. This exposes Beringia, a wide land bridge joining Asia and North America. Beringia itself is crossed by rivers, forming lakes and marshes that support rich ecosystems. For humans, this land bridge is not a narrow path, but a homeland, stretching more than 1,000 kilometers. Populations settle there for millennia, sustained by water, animals, and plants. Genetic studies suggest a Beringian standstill, when humans lived in this region for thousands of years before spreading south into the Americas. Rivers made that long pause possible. Daily life in the frozen north was bound to cycles of light and darkness. In summer, the sun barely set, and rivers rushed with meltwater. Camps spread along bank, where fish traps and spears provided steady food. In winter, darkness lasted long, and rivers froze solid, yet even then, holes cut in ice yielded fish, and frozen channels served as pathways for sleds and hunters. Archaeological finds of bone points, needles, and awls show that clothing of hide and fur was stitched with care. Without such garments, survival in -40 degrees would not have been possible. Again, rivers made these lives feasible, concentrating resources into narrow corridors across tundra. One striking find at Yana RHS includes wolf bones carefully worked into tools. This suggests humans hunted predators, making use of their hides and bones as much as those of prey. In such an environment, nothing was wasted. Ivory from mammoth tusks became points and ornaments. Bones became awls and needles. Hides became tents. The river valleys provided not only access to animals, but also places to store and process their remains. Mystery deepens with the timing of the first entry into the Americas. Did humans cross into Beringia during the last glacial maximum, more than 20,000 years ago, living there while ice sheets blocked the way south? Or did they wait until warming opened corridors between glaciers? Genetic evidence supports the idea of a long residence in Beringia, followed by expansion. Archaeological discoveries on both sides of the Pacific continue to refine the story, but all point back to rivers as the guides of movement. To imagine the scene is to picture a horizon without trees, where rivers cut dark lines through pale tundra. Hunters walk along frozen banks, their breaths visible in the air. Fires flicker within shelters made of mammoth bones and hides, smoke rising into the still sky. Children gather around hearths, holding beads carved from ivory, while adults scrape hides with stone tools. Outside, reindeer pass in long lines across the snow, heading toward waterholes that remain unfrozen. These rhythms, ordinary in their moment, are extraordinary in their endurance. From above, the frozen north appears vast and silent. The Lena and the Yenisei stretch thousands of kilometers, braided with countless channels, yet along their banks, small dots of smoke rise, fragile signs of life in a continent of cold. Each dot represents a community, living with patience, ingenuity, and resilience. The rivers reflect pale light of the Arctic sun, carrying meltwater toward seas locked in ice. Humanity persists here, drawn always to the water, as it has been since its first steps from Africa. The lessons of the frozen north are many. Fire and clothing become as essential as food. Rivers provide structure to otherwise unbroken plains. Cooperation grows, for no one can survive alone in such a land. Encounters with mammoths, bison, and predators demand skill and courage. And through it all, humans not only endure but also create beads, ornaments, marks of culture carried even to the edge of the Arctic Circle. And so, the rivers of Siberia guide people farther still, toward Beringia, and eventually into the Americas. They sustain hunters in winter, fishermen in summer, families in every season. They hold memory of camps, tools, and fires left behind. The frozen north may seem a place of silence, but along its rivers, the pulse of human migration continues. In their flow beneath ice, they whisper of endurance, guiding humanity toward the last great continents of the world. From the rivers of Siberia, the path of migration flows outward once more. At the height of the Ice Age, and the oceans are low, exposing the wide plain of Beringia. It stretches from Siberia to Alaska, a bridge of land more than 1,000 kilometers across. Its surface is not icebound but open steppe, dotted with rivers, lakes, and marshes. Herds of mammoth, bison, and horse graze on its grasses. Hunters follow, setting their camps beside streams that cut through permafrost. For thousands of years, Beringia is both home and passage, a place of waiting before the final step into the Americas. Archaeological evidence shows that humans reached northeastern Siberia by 30,000 years ago. Sites such as Yana RHS prove their presence far above the Arctic Circle, surviving in bitter cold with fire, tools, and culture. From there, the journey into Beringia was natural, guided by the same rivers that had sustained them for millennia. Genetic studies suggest that once in Beringia, populations lived in isolation for thousands of years. This Beringian standstill explains why the ancestors of indigenous peoples of the Americas share a distinct lineage. The rivers of Beringia supported this pause, offering food, water, and shelter, while ice sheets to the south blocked further movement. One lesser-known detail comes from footprints discovered in White Sands, New Mexico. These impressions in ancient mud, dated to more than 20,000 years ago, record the presence of humans deep within the Americas far earlier than once thought. Children's prints run alongside adult tracks, and the marks of mammoth and giant sloth cross their paths. These footprints are direct testimony, unmediated by tools or bones. They show that rivers and wetlands provided corridors southward, even when ice still covered much of the continent. The question of how humans entered the Americas remains one of prehistory's greatest mysteries. For decades, the ice-free corridor model dominated, proposing that people moved south through a gap between glaciers in western Canada after the last glacial maximum. Yet new evidence suggests an earlier, coastal route. When sea levels were low, rivers and estuaries along the Pacific coast offered passage, rich in fish, shellfish, and sea mammals. Boats or rafts may have carried groups along this watery highway, their camps hidden now beneath ocean. Whether inland or coastal, rivers once again guided the way. From a planetary scale, the opening of the Americas represents the last great expansion of Homo sapiens. Africa, Eurasia, and Sahel were already inhabited. Only the vast continents of the New World remained. The drop in sea level made the crossing possible. When ice retreated, rivers carved valleys through the continent, creating corridors for migration. Within a few millennia, humans spread from Alaska to Patagonia, crossing distances greater than from Paris to Seoul many times over. Daily life during these first American journeys was both familiar and new. Camps formed beside rivers where salmon ran upstream and waterfowl gathered. Families fished with spears, hunted with stone-tipped weapons, and collected plants along floodplains. Children splashed in shallows, while adults scraped hides and retouched blades. At night, fires flickered by the water, as they had on other continents. Yet the animals were new. Mammoths walked alongside ground sloths, camels, and giant beavers. The rivers offered abundance but also surprise. Archaeological sites confirm these adaptations. At Monteverde in southern Chile, preserved wooden structures, hearths, and food remains date to more than 14,000 years ago. The site lies beside a stream, its waterlogged soils preserving footprints and plant fibers. This proves that by this time, humans had already reached the far south of the continent. The spread was rapid, guided by rivers that threaded through forests, plains, and mountains. One striking detail from Monteverde is the presence of seaweed remained, carried more than 80 kilometers inland. This suggests contact between coastal and inland groups, and the deliberate transport of resources. Just as in earlier migrations, rivers linked different zones, carrying not only people but materials and ideas. Mystery deepens with the fate of megafauna. Within a few thousand years of human arrival, mammoths, giant sloths, and other large animals vanished from the Americas. Did human hunting play a central role? Or did climate shifts drive these extinctions? Likely both. The rivers preserve clues, bones with cut marks, charcoal from fires, pollen shifts in floodplain sediments. These records reveal how humans and environment reshaped one another in the New World. From above, the picture is immense. Rivers pour from glaciers into valleys, winding through grasslands and forests. Along their banks, camps form, smoke rising into cold air. Canoes glide along currents, carrying hunters and families to new grounds. Footprints mark mud that will harden into enduring testimony. The pattern repeats across continents: river, camp, fire, journey. The Americas are vast, yet rivers break them into paths humans can follow. The expansion southward was swift. Within perhaps 2 millennia, people reached Patagonia at the continent's far end. The pace is astonishing, but rivers and coasts made it possible. They offered steady water, predictable food, and navigable routes. The story of migration into the Americas is therefore not one of a blind rush, but of guided steps, always along the courses of water. In indigenous traditions, rivers hold central roles. They are not only sources of sustenance, but beings of memory, carrying stories of ancestors, shaping identity and culture. These traditions reach back to the very first crossings, when rivers were both guide and companion. They remind us that the story of entering the New World is not only a matter of archaeology or genetics, but of enduring human connection to water. And so, the rivers of the Americas receive humanity. They carry footprints in mud, fish in their currents, and stories along their banks. They turn the last uninhabited continent into home. The frozen north recedes behind. Beringia sinks beneath the sea, but the rivers remain, flowing through forests, plains, and mountains. Into the New World, guided as always by water, humanity completes its global journey. The story of rivers in the Ice Age is not only one of guidance and abundance, it is also one of loss, for climate is never still. As Earth tilts and wobbles in its orbit, as ice sheets advance and retreat, rivers themselves change. What once flows wide and deep can vanish into sand. What once nurtures grass and forest can dry into emptiness. For humans dependent on these waters, such changes bring hardship. They force movement, adaptation, or abandonment. The rivers that carried them so far sometimes disappear, leaving silence where life once gathered. Evidence of these shifts lies across continents. In the Sahara, the great green corridors that once joined Africa to the Mediterranean fade. Monsoons retreat southward, lakes shrink, and rivers dry. Sites once full of stone tools, fish bones, and hearths fall quiet. Archaeologists find only dust overlying rich layers of life. In Central Asia, glacial melt shifts its courses, cutting off valleys where people once thrived. In the Americas, river systems expand and contract with advancing ice, alternately opening and closing corridors. Everywhere, humans feel the uncertainty of water. One lesser-known detail comes from Lake Megachad in Africa. At its greatest extent, this ancient lake covered more than 300,000 square kilometers, larger than today's Caspian Sea. Its inflowing rivers supported vast populations of fish, birds, and humans. But as climate dried, the lake shrank to a fraction of its size. People who had lived by its shores were forced to leave, scattering into drier lands where survival was harder. The memory of abundance was replaced by the struggle for each drop of water. The mystery is not only how rivers changed, but how quickly. Some transitions took thousands of years, giving people time to adjust. Others may have happened within a few generations, cutting off lifelines before groups could recover. Archaeologists debate whether sudden droughts drove migrations on continental scales. Genetic records hint at population bottlenecks, times when humanity nearly vanished. Was the cause drought, flood, or volcanic winter? The answers remain uncertain, hidden within sediments and DNA. From a planetary scale, we see these changes were tied to the advance of ice sheets, and when glaciers grew, they locked away water, lowering seas and stretching rivers outward. When they melted, seas rose, drowning coastal plains and swallowing estuaries. For humans, both extremes brought challenge. Drought forced them inland, flood forced them uphill. In both cases, the rivers shifted, breaking patterns of movement that had lasted for centuries. Daily life under these conditions was fragile. Families camped by dwindling streams, digging into sand for water. Fish grew scarce, herds moved away, plants withered. Fire still burned at night, but its warmth could not bring food. Children grew hungry, and adults searched farther each day. Camps were abandoned, tools left behind, as groups walked toward distant horizons where rivers might still flow. Survival demanded mobility, and mobility demanded trust in whatever signs of water the land revealed. One striking case is found in Arabia. During wet phases, rivers and lakes dotted the peninsula, sustaining humans and animals alike. Stone tools cluster around these ancient basins, proof of thriving life. Yet during dry phases, deserts returned, erasing rivers and forcing departure. This cycle repeated many times, leaving behind alternating layers of occupation and absence. The story is not one of continuous presence, but of repeated retreat, as climate turned against those who tried to remain. Mystery deepens when we ask how humans responded beyond movement. Did they develop strategies to store water, to preserve food, to endure drought? Some evidence suggests yes. Grinding stones from dry regions show processing of seeds that could last longer than fresh plants. Charcoal layers suggest controlled burning to encourage growth of useful species. These practices hint at resilience, an early form of shaping the land. Yet whether such strategies could truly overcome the loss of rivers remains uncertain. From above, the pattern appears stark. Rivers that once spread like veins across continents shrink into isolated lines. Lakes contract, deltas retreat, estuaries drown beneath rising seas. For humanity, each change demands choice: follow the water or perish. The footprints we find, the tools scattered across shifting landscapes, are records of these decisions. They tell of people who refused to vanish, who moved when climate forced them, always searching for rivers still alive. The planetary cycles that caused these hardships also set the stage for renewal. When monsoons returned, when glaciers melted, rivers flowed again. People returned to abandoned valleys, resettled lake shores, rebuilt camps on terraces above fresh floods. Archaeology shows layers of return, as if landscapes breathed with humanity in rhythm with climate. Drought drove them out, abundance drew them back. The relationship between humans and rivers was never static, always shifting with Earth's cycles. To imagine this time is to feel both hope and uncertainty. Families gather at the edge of a drying lake, its shore retreating each season. Fires flicker low. Food grows scarce. One morning, they decide to move. They follow faint signs of water, birds in the sky, reeds in the distance, the scent of damp soil carried on wind. After days of walking, they find a river still flowing, its banks green with life. Relief fills the camp, but they know it may not last. The river is both salvation and warning, alive today, uncertain tomorrow. And so, the rivers that once welcomed humanity sometimes vanish. Climate turns against them, reshaping the map of survival. Yet through these hardships, humans adapt, move, and persist. They learn to follow cycles, to live not in certainty but in change. The rivers do not promise permanence. They promise only rhythm, and humanity learns to walk in time with it. When the Ice Age begins to loosen its grip, the world shifts in rhythm. The massive glaciers that had held oceans captive start to retreat. As they melt, water flows into valleys, swelling rivers, spreading wide floodplains. Climates grow warmer, seasons become more predictable, and vegetation flourishes along riverbanks. For tens of millennia, humans have walked as hunters and gatherers, always following rivers as guides. Yet now, in this new age, rivers do more than direct movement. They invite permanence. Along their banks, people begin to plant, to tame, to remain. Seeds, once scattered casually, become the first steps toward cultivation. Archaeological evidence marks this turning point. In the Fertile Crescent, the valleys of the Euphrates and Tigris, the Jordan, and the Nile reveal charred grains of wheat and barley. At sites such as Jerf el Ahmar and Abu Huraira, grinding stones appear, showing how people processed cereals into flour. Mortars and pestles carved from basalt suggest repeated use, not chance. Floodwaters from these rivers deposited fertile silt each year, making their valleys rich in nutrients. For humans, the rhythm of planting and harvest slowly took the place of endless wandering. One lesser-known discovery lies at Ohalo-2 on the shore of the Sea of Galilee. Here, more than 20,000 years ago, huts of brushwood were built beside the water. Within them, archaeologists uncovered thousands of charred seeds, wild wheat, barley, legumes, and even grapes. These were gathered, stored, and possibly sown again. Though not yet full farming, the site shows people experimenting with plants long before agriculture formally began. The river-fed lake gave them abundance, and in that abundance the first ideas of cultivation emerged. Yet the reasons for this shift remain uncertain. For hundreds of thousands of years, humans survived by foraging. Why change? Some researchers argue that as the Ice Age ended, stable climates created fertile valleys that encouraged repeated planting. Others believe that growing populations forced innovation, as hunting and gathering alone could no longer feed large groups. Another view emphasizes rivers themselves. Their annual floods renewed soil predictably, making agriculture possible in ways drier lands could not match. Likely, all these factors combined. From a planetary scale, context is striking. As glaciers retreated, coastlines shifted. Sunderland sank beneath rising seas. Beringia disappeared, ending the great land bridge. Ancient river mouths vanished beneath waves. Yet inland, other rivers grew stronger, nourished by meltwater. They offered fertile basins that became stable anchors for settlement. What the oceans erased, rivers restored. In their floodplains, humanity found not only food, but continuity. Daily life beside these rivers began to transform. Families still hunted and fished, but they also scattered seeds deliberately into moist soil. They returned months later to harvest stalks of barley or wheat. They learned to store grain in pit, protecting it against pests and weather. They shaped sickles from flint blades set into wooden handles, efficient for cutting large quantities of stalks. Dogs, already companions, now lived closer with humans, protecting stores and helping with herds. Gradually, mobility gave way to rootedness. One striking site is Sayonu in southeastern Anatolia. Here, near the headwaters of the Tigris, stone houses were built around communal courtyards. Excavations reveal stored grain, animal bones, and hearths, all pointing to early farming life. The settlement stood for centuries, its people tied to rivers that watered their crops. Archaeologists believe goats and sheep were domesticated here, their bones showing patterns of controlled breeding. Rivers not only fed plants but attracted animals, creating opportunities for taming. Mysteries remain in these beginnings. Was domestication of animals deliberate or accidental? Perhaps goats lingered near camps for discarded food and water, gradually becoming accustomed to humans. Perhaps people began capturing young animals, raising them until tameness grew. Bones suggest selective hunting of males, keeping females alive, an early form of herd management. Whatever the process, rivers were central. Animals, like people, gathered at water. In that closeness, domestication began. Symbolic life also flourished beside rivers. At Göbekli Tepe, not far from the Euphrates, massive stone pillars were raised more than 11,000 years ago. Carved with animals and abstract symbols, they represent the earliest monumental architecture known. Though not a farming village, the site reveals communal gatherings tied to rituals. Some scholars suggest that feasts here encourage planting, as large groups needed stable food sources. Again, rivers provided both water and setting, shaping the cultural as well as the practical. From above, the change is profound. Where once rivers were dotted with temporary camp, now they host villages. Floodplains become fields. Forest clearings become grazing grounds. People still move, but more often within smaller ranges. tied to seasons of planting and harvest. The river, once only a path forward, becomes a circle of return, binding communities to its rhythm. Yet permanence is never without risk. Floods that once enriched fields could also destroy them. Droughts that lowered rivers could bring famine. Archaeological layers reveal both growth and collapse. At some sites, villages expand for centuries, then vanish suddenly. Climate instability, overuse of soil, or shifting river courses may all be causes. The gift of rivers is abundance, but their power is also unpredictable. To stay beside them is to accept their dual nature. Daily life in these early farming settlements must have carried a new texture. Children learned to scatter seeds as much as to fish or hunt. Adults divided labor between tending crops, herding goats, and gathering reeds. Grain was ground into flour, baked into flatbreads, stored for winter. Stone walls rose, separating dwellings, hinting at new forms of social order. Fires still burned at night, but around them, people now spoke not only of where to go, but of when to plant. Across the world, this pattern repeated. Along the Yellow River in China, millet was cultivated. Along the Yangtze, rice paddies developed. In the Indus Valley, wheat and barley spread from the west. Along the Nile, annual floods created one of history's richest farming systems. Each river nurtured its own form of agriculture, shaped by local plants, soils, and traditions. Yet all share the same principle. Rivers anchor settlement, seeds take root, and humans stay. This transformation is one of the greatest shifts in prehistory. From wandering bands to settled farmers, from stone flakes to fields of grain, humanity changes its relationship with the earth. Rivers make it possible. They are not only lifelines but teachers, showing patterns of season and flood that humans learn to echo with planting and harvest. What begins as experiment becomes tradition. What begins as survival becomes society. And so, the journey that once followed rivers outward now circles back to them. Seeds sprout beside water. Villages rise on floodplains. Herds gather near streams. Humanity, long defined by movement, begins to root itself in place. The rivers flow on as they always have, but now they sustain not only the journey, but the beginning of civilization itself. The story of rivers and humanity reaches its quietest chapter. After tens of thousands of years of wandering, following water across deserts, plains, and ice, people begin to stay. Yet even as cities rise and fields spread across floodplains, the rivers themselves do not change their essence. They continue to flow, carrying meltwater from mountains, rains from clouds, sediments from upstream to downstream. They remain steady presences, indifferent to kingdoms, faithful only to the pull of gravity and time. For humanity, they are no longer only guides of migration, but lifelines of continuity. Archaeology reveals how this bond endures. Along the Nile, inscriptions carved into temple walls mark annual floods, recording both prosperity and famine. In Mesopotamia, the Euphrates and Tigris supported irrigation systems that stretched for kilometers, channels carefully dug to deliver water to crops. Clay tablets show accounts of grain harvests, wages paid in barley, canals maintained by collective labor. In the Indus Valley, bricks were set into wells, drains, and reservoirs, revealing an attention to water management that shaped entire cities. Far to the east, the Yellow River supported dynasties, even as its floods destroyed villages and forced rebuilding. Wherever rivers flowed, human life adapted, expanded, and endured. One lesser-known detail emerges from Lake Suigetsu in Japan. Its sediments preserve thousands of annual layers, known as varves, recording pollen, ash, and dust. Scientists use these layers to reconstruct precise timelines of climate change stretching back tens of millennia. The quiet accumulation of silt and pollen offers a mirror to human time, a continuous record against which migrations, settlements, and collapses can be measured. In this way, the river and lake beds themselves carry the memory of Earth, even when human voices are silent. Mysteries still surround the fate of civilizations bound to rivers. Why did the Indus Valley cities decline? Streets once full of traders and potters became empty, wells ran dry, bricks crumbled. Some argue rivers shifted course, leaving settlements stranded. Others suggest drought or political strain. The truth remains uncertain, layered in soil and silence. Even in Egypt, where the Nile offered unmatched stability, dynasties fell and kingdoms fractured. Yet the river itself remained, flowing year after year, regardless of human rise and fall. This contrast, the fragility of societies and the endurance of rivers, lingers as one of history's quiet truths. On a planetary scale, rivers continue to shape continents. They cut deep canyons through rock, carve valleys where glaciers once lay, and spread deltas into seas. They carry nutrients from mountains to estuaries, feeding ecosystems far from their sources, the Amazon, the Congo, the Mississippi, the Ganges. Each is a thread woven into the living fabric of the earth. Their flows redistribute water, sediment, and life itself, connecting forests, plains, and oceans into a single system. For humanity, they remain both map and heartbeat, a reminder of the larger cycles that govern the planet. Daily life beside these rivers reflects both permanence and dependence. A pot is filled at dawn, its clay shaped by river mud. Nets are cast in the evening, weighted with stones from the riverbed. Floods mark planting seasons, their silt nourishing crops. Bridges rise, ferries cross, barges drift with currents. Generations repeat these acts without pause, embedding the rhythm of water into culture, ritual, and memory. For those who live beside rivers, their sound is the background to existence, as steady as breath. From above, the vision is timeless. Blue lines thread across continents, spreading outward like veins across a body. First, they are dotted with small fires of hunter camps, then with villages, then with sprawling towns and cities. The rivers themselves do not change. They mirror the stars above, reflecting moonlight on nights when the first humans looked skyward. They murmur with the same voice heard by those who scattered from Africa, who crossed Asia, who reached the ends of the earth. Their constancy links every age together. As history deepens, rivers become stages for new transformations. Writing begins on clay tablets shaped from river mud. Trade moves along barges, exchanging grain for stone, fish for tools. Myths and stories grow, placing rivers at the center of creation and renewal. The Nile is called eternal, the Ganges sacred, the Tigris and Euphrates gifts of the gods. These beliefs reflect not only reverence, but dependence. To live without rivers was almost unthinkable. So deeply were they tied to food, water, and identity. And yet, permanence was never absolute. Floods could still destroy, drought could still starve. Even the mightiest rivers reminded people of their limits. Archaeological layers show repeated cycles of flourishing and abandonment, of rebuilding and collapse. This fragility is part of the story. Rivers endure, but human use of them demands constant adjustment. Canals silt up, levees break, fields fail. Each generation learns anew the balance between water's gift and its danger. In the quiet of the present, these lessons remain. To listen beside a river today is to hear the same rhythm that guided migrations, anchored settlements, and shaped civilizations. The sound of flowing water carries memories deeper than words. It connects the footprints of those who left Africa 70,000 years ago with the fields sown 10,000 years ago, with the cities built 5,000 years ago, with the villages that still line riverbanks now. The river still flows. It flows through memory, through time, through the human story itself. It flows when we walk, when we plant, when we rest. It flows when we are awake, and it flows when we sleep. Its continuity reassures. Its presence lulls. In its endless movement, there is constancy. In its constancy, there is stillness. And so, the story closes where it began, with water, with rivers, with the quiet sound that guided humanity from its first steps to its first roots. The river does not end. It moves forward, always, carrying us with it. The story of humanity stretches far, across deserts, forests, mountains, and seas. Yet in every chapter, rivers have been there. They guided the first migrations out of Africa. They carved corridors through the Ice Age. They nourished camps of hunters and gatherers. They fed the first seeds of farming, the first villages, the first cities. Their sound is the oldest background to human life, steady, flowing, patient. Some questions remain unanswered. We do not know every path the first travelers took. We do not know exactly why some civilizations flourished, while others faded. We do not know all the ways rivers shaped choices, or how people first decided to plant seeds instead of wander. These mysteries remind us that history is never complete, that silence is part of the record as much as stone and bone. What endures is the river itself. It flows through time as through land, carrying silt, memory, and life. It connects beginnings to endings, migrations to settlements, the unknown past to the present moment. To listen to a river is to hear continuity, the same sound that touched the ears of those who lived 20,000 years ago, or 10,000, or yesterday. As the night deepens, imagine that sound, a current moving slowly over stones, a surface catching the reflection of stars, a rhythm steady enough to rest upon. The river still flows as it always has, and as it always will.